Good morning everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we continue the discussion we started last time on behaviorism with Watson. However, talking about a second generation behaviorist, I am in fact talking about Skinner. Skinner, with his many experiments, first started with animals and then transferred to humans, was able to demonstrate the validity of the behaviorist approach on the educational level. In fact, he carried out many studies in the laboratory on small animals, such as mice or pigeons, and put them in boxes called Skinner boxes, Skinner after his name. And this was not out of a form of sadism or cruelty for its own sake, but to demonstrate that the mechanism that is the basis that regulates all behavior, both animal and human, is reinforcement. Skinner, to develop his theory, assumes that both animals and humans possess a wide range of behaviors that they enact in certain situations. In fact, in his experiment with the pigeon, he placed the animal inside the Skinner box and placed a button inside this box. Once this button was pressed, it would activate a mechanism that brought up food to the animal itself. What Skinner noticed was that the pigeon moving in bulk inside this box sooner or later with its beak would hit the button and thus have access to the food. And he also noticed that the pigeon for a period of time would continue to make completely random movements, but then every time it would press this button and get the food, it would take less time to get to the button itself and get it back. As if somehow with this positive reinforcement the food always speeded up, so that it would always go to press the button to get precisely the food. Skinner therefore concluded that the food had in some way functioned as a reinforcer, that is, as a stimulus capable of selecting among the various possible behaviors the one suitable for obtaining precisely the food itself, thus giving that determined response that was no longer a probability but thus became a certainty. In Skinner's experiment, the appearance of the food is definitely a positive reinforcer. However, Skinner also experimented with a negative type of reinforcer, namely another button that if pressed gave the pigeon a shock. What did he notice? That after a while and after a few shocks taken from the poor animal, the animal would definitely head much faster toward the button that could give it food at the expense instead of the one that gave the shocks. Thus, by highlighting the association that is established between a behavior and a reinforcing stimulus, Skinner identified a new type of conditioning, a conditioning called operant conditioning. According to the author, then, this principle of reinforcement can have important rigodutes, therefore also in education and in teaching. In fact, even human beings tend to repeat those actions that have been positively reinforced at the time they occur, even if they had initially started out completely randomly. For example, think of a child who is warbling certain words in his playpen, and between precisely meaningless warbles, sooner or later maybe the double syllable papa comes out. At that point, the mother will think that the child is requesting food and will give him a cookie, give him something to eat. The child will then be incentivized to repeat this action and to repeat precisely this syllable so that he will then get another reward back. So in this case, the cookie functions precisely as a reinforcement of the action itself. Thus, in education, it may be important, according to the author, to hypothesize reinforcement programs that help stabilize certain behaviors. The pedagogical implications of all his thinking are made explicit in two books. The first of 1948, The Walden II, and the second, The Technology of Teaching, of 1968. In The Walden II, Skinner hypothesizes a type of society where individual freedom and dignity is won through education, an education that must be based on operant conditioning and through the elimination of punishments and instruments of repression. So he starts right at the base. He says it is useless to try to solve situations once they have been accomplished and are negative, but one must act preventively and try to use reinforcement on what are desirable behaviors precisely for the purpose of a positive society, and not instead on negative behaviors that have already been enacted, to act precisely with positive reinforcement even before things are done. Instead, to get to what is inferred in the second paper, and that is the technology of teaching, Skinner starts from the assumption that in education, and therefore in the school setting, we need to intervene with programmed instruction, which is an educational proposal that took off very much in the year from 50s and 60s and is based on various points. Now let's try to understand what they are. The first is that all knowledge translates to empirically verifiable performance. For this, he says that every school discipline is a sequence of skills that the student can learn through it even before it is a set of cultural and notional content. Another key point is that the learner must be able to control his or her learning and must be helped with positive reinforcement as he or she improves. And another point is that reinforcement must be gradual and must occur in small fragments of learning. This is where the critical issue comes right out of his book, The Technology of Teaching, precisely because Skinner sees that in traditional schools, this reinforcement is very difficult to implement because it becomes difficult for the teacher to simultaneously reinforce all the pupils who are different from each other, who have different timings, have different ways of learning, and therefore general and simultaneous reinforcement becomes practically impossible. But Skinner finds a practical solution to this problem through the use of teaching machines, and that is real mechanical power tools that help the student by providing him with both materials and useful exercises to facilitate him both in the assimilation of each learning frame, but also to help him in the path of controlling the learning itself. Each student then would have his or her own machine at his or her disposal, thus making individualized learning possible. These machines then were programmed in a very simple way. In practice, they would ask questions, they would record the processing time of the answer, and would move on to a next and therefore slightly more difficult question than the previous one, only in case the answer given by the student was correct. Later, the use of these increasingly cutting-edge technologies through computerization not only made a great contribution in schools, but were also taken outside and were used in various other areas as well. With this talk on teaching machines and the educational plan brought in precisely by Skinner, I have finished my video today. If you have any questions or curiosities, I invite you as usual to ask me in the comments below. In the meantime, I greet you, thank you for your attention, and I refer you to the next video.